Friday afternoon in Los Angeles. The atmosphere at the Athena Tower launch event was as tense as a tightly stretched violin string. Inside the expansive 1,200 square meter glass lobby, the lights beamed down directly from the ceiling, reflecting off the gleaming black marble floor, creating a scene both austere and luxurious. Groups of guests in evening wear moved like filtered currents of the upper class. Cameras clicked incessantly. Champagne glistened. Tales of success were told in smug tones over soft jazz, as if everyone had just closed on 3 penthouses in Beverly Hills that morning. No one paid attention to the woman sitting alone near the main pillar, about 20 steps from the check-in area. She wore a gray wool coat, long, curly hair loosely tied at the back, slightly worn low-heeled shoes, and a frayed canvas bag resting neatly on her lap. A rolled-up blueprint peeked out from her hand. The paper yellowed and creased from many folds. She looked up at the ceiling, eyes weighing something in silence, then turned to glance at the reception desk, where 3 young staff members were welcoming guests with program smiles. In over 30 minutes, not one person asked if she needed assistance. One of the staff, after escorting a group of Japanese guests to the VIP section, turned back and whispered to her blonde colleague. Both burst into laughter. She's been sitting there forever. Maybe she thinks this is some kind of job fair. Looks like a washed-up designer, still clutching a blueprint, probably here begging for a job. Or maybe a janitor who got lost. The third girl, who looked younger and possibly Latina, glanced hesitantly toward the woman, then quickly looked away when she caught the team leader's eye. The woman remained still. No smile, no reaction. Her posture wasn't submissive, it was patient, like someone who knew exactly what was coming, but chose silence to observe. Across the lobby, the senior sales team was deep in discussion with brokers. Pale blue LED stage lights cast a soft glow on their faces, making the gathering resemble a talent audition more than a real estate summit. A woman in a red suit stepped out from the staff-only zone. It was Angela Spencer, Westside's head of sales, famously known as the Penthouse Queen, for closing $5 million deals in a single sitting. She walked straight to the front desk. "Why is that woman sitting over there? Who let her in?" Angela's voice was loud enough for nearby guests to hear, but just below the threshold of shouting. The blonde staffer fumbled. She was already here before we arrived. No registration." Angela squinted. "Next time, anyone without a VIP invite, platinum tier, is not allowed in the lobby. We're not a shelter." She turned sharply, locking her icy gaze on the woman still sitting there. She strode over, each heel strike on the marble echoing like a judge's gavel. "Hello," Angela offered a tight-lipped smile. "Are you looking for someone? This is a private event, not open to the public." The woman looked up, calm and composed. "I came to review the design layout. I want to understand how they constructed the western canopy." Angela blinked. "You came to review the design? You work in the field?" "I've contributed to a few projects." "A few projects?" Angela smirked. "I see. Well, I'm afraid our design team doesn't have time for private consultations today. If you're looking for renderings, they're available online. I'm not here for promotional content. I want to examine the intersection of the roof edge and the internal lighting frame." Angela tilted her head. "You speak as if you know architecture." "A little. Are you an architect?" "I used to be." "I see." Angela glanced down at the woman's worn shoes. "And now you're hoping to get hired by my firm?" The woman said nothing. Angela chuckled, stepped back slightly, and glanced toward the stage where investors were gathering. "Ma'am, this is Athena. This is the top-tier real estate product in Westside this year. We don't recruit from the lobby, and if you need a brochure, reception can give you one." She turned away, but before she could take a full step, a quiet voice behind her spoke. "Athena doesn't need a parabolic canopy, but I kept it because my father liked that style." Angela froze. She turned back. "What did you say?" The woman stood up. "The canopy, western corner. It's redundant, but I left it." Angela narrowed her eyes, suspicion creeping in. "You're talking like—" "I know every single brick in Athena." Angela laughed nervously. "Oh, really? I also drew the original lighting path on the initial 3D layout, but when I submitted it to the board, they said it was unnecessary, because lighting doesn't influence selling price. Angela was silent for 2 seconds, then scoffed. I don't know who you are, but you can't stand here talking as if you're the one who designed the building? Exactly. Do you even know who led Athena? Wexler and Park. Not the original blueprint was mine. Angela fully stepped back. She hadn't even begun to react when the event's main MC took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight marks the unveiling of Phase 3, the final floors of the Athena project. But more importantly, we are honored to welcome a very special guest, the mind behind the entire project, from concept to execution. Someone who chose silence for 3 years, not because she had nothing to say, but because she believed her work would speak louder than words. Please welcome CEO of Cruz Realty Group, the lead behind Athena, Valentina Cruz. The room fell so quiet that you could hear a glass drop onto the carpet. Angela turned back to look at the woman, who was now placing the old blueprint back into her bag. You? But Valentina was already walking away, her worn heels tapping precisely as if each step had been calculated 3 years ago. In her hand, the old drawing was the only thing that remained from the very first meeting between her and her father, back when he was still alive, and still believed that a building should do more than sell. It should shine. Angela Spencer stood motionless. No one said a word. And for perhaps the first time in her entire career, she had nothing left to close. As Valentina stepped onto the stage, the entire room seemed to freeze for 3 full breaths. Some people didn't yet understand what was happening. Others turned to each other, whispering, "Who is that? She's the CEO?" And those faint murmurs, barely louder than a mosquito's hum, quickly surged into an undercurrent flowing through every row of seats. No one had imagined that the modest woman they just dismissed was the one holding complete control over the project the entire city had been watching with anticipation. The spotlight hit Valentina's face, illuminating it like a mirror reflecting every glance that had brushed past her earlier in the lobby. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She didn't pose. She simply stood still, holding the microphone with both hands as if she were trying to keep 3 years of suppressed anger from spilling out all at once. Valentina lifted her head, looked straight into the front row where the senior management team was seated, and spoke in a voice not loud, but clear to every syllable. I'm not good at speeches. I don't enjoy the spotlight, but I'm here because there are things that need to be said, not to correct mistakes, but to remind people of the truths that have been forgotten. A silent wave swept across the room. Down below, Angela Spencer stared at her phone, not typing, just letting her hand rest on the screen, as if hoping it would deliver a logical explanation for what was unfolding. A few others opened social media, typing in Valentina Cruz, slowly realizing that she wasn't unknown. She had simply been deliberately kept in the shadows by the system. Valentina continued, Athena is not a building. It's a promise between me and my father, a man who believed that great structures shouldn't just symbolize wealth, but should be opportunities to bring light to places once deemed unworthy of it. An elderly man sitting in the third row nodded slightly. He was one of the few who remembered the groundbreaking ceremony 3 years ago, when Valentina stood on stage next to her father, though the press that day only photographed him, not her. The whispers grew louder. A staff member from the company's design team, named Jordan, turned to his colleague and whispered, I remember now. Last year we received a sketch from the account V. Cruz, but it was ignored because there was no official title attached. She was the sender. His coworker replied, I saw handwriting like that on the rooftop plans. I assumed it came from someone at Wexler and Park. Jordan paused, then murmured aloud, We used her design, but removed her name from the credits. That statement made both of them glance toward the stage, as if hearing Valentina for the first time. Angela Spencer remained silent. Her hand, still holding the phone, was trembling, not from anger, but because, for the first time in her life, she realized she had insulted not just a person, but a legacy. Valentina looked down at those who were starting to pay attention, not because she was the CEO, but because her words didn't sound like the usual polished language reserved for these types of galas. For the past 3 years, I've remained in the dark, not because I had something to hide, but because I wanted to see how this system operated when no one believed I had control. And now, I know. Applause began, scattered but real. Some young employees, newer to the industry, clapped not because others did, but because they believed in what they had just heard. In the back left corner of the room, the young Latina receptionist still stood by the check-in table, eyes wide open, hands clenched. She had been the only one on her team who didn't mock Valentina earlier, though she hadn't found the courage to step forward either. Backstage, the marketing director, a white man named Richard, was frantically making calls. Who approved this speech? Why weren't we informed ahead of time? But no one had answers. Because what was happening wasn't in the script. This wasn't PR. This was truth. And it was spreading like a beam of light no one could contain. Valentina ended her speech with a single sentence. If you've ever been ignored, don't worry. Maybe they just didn't have enough light to see you. But they will, when you start shining from the very spot they left empty. She bowed, placed the microphone gently on the podium, and walked off stage, leaving behind a room in complete silence. Not because no one had anything to say, but because each person was now confronting a personal truth. That they had failed to recognize the woman who built the entire tower, simply because she wasn't dressed like them. As she passed the reception desk, her eyes met those of the young woman. Valentina stopped and spoke softly, just enough for the two of them to hear. Next time, don't lower your head in front of someone who belittles others. Sometimes just one timely glance is enough to change an entire system. The girl nodded, and for the first time that evening, smiled a smile that didn't come from serving a guest. That night, social media flooded with clips of Valentina's speech. The hashtag number sign "She Built Athena" began to spread at lightning speed. Within 12 hours, the video had over 300,000 views and thousands of comments, most from people who had faced discrimination in architecture, real estate, or design, especially women and people of color. One user wrote, "She didn't need a loud voice, just the right silence." And the whole room had to listen. The next morning, the headquarters of Cruz Realty Group on Wilshire Boulevard opened earlier than usual. Before working hours, an internal email was sent out to all employees. The subject line was just one simple sentence: check the wall behind you. No one understood it at first, but as each person arrived and walked into their workspace, they immediately noticed the recognition plaques hanging along the hallway, listing the design team, engineers, and project leads for Athena, had been taken down overnight. In their place was a glass notice board. Temporary suspension of credit listings. Full review of contribution acknowledgement process underway. No logo, no signature. But everyone understood. What had happened last night wasn't a media moment. It was the beginning of a full system audit. On the 6th floor, the technical department, Jordan was pulling up archived design files from the internal server. He'd worked in the industry for 12 years, familiar with the practice of projects passing through many hands, each tweaking something, so everyone gets credit. But this time, when he opened the original 3D file, he found something even he hadn't expected. The base file was saved under the name VCRUZ initial sketch at N, with a creation date from nearly 3 years ago, matching the early conceptual timeline of Athena. Jordan sat silently for a long while. It was the first draft rendering, untouched by commercial edits, free of the features tailored to the high-end market. At the bottom of the document, hidden in a background layer that no one had noticed before, was a handwritten note. Don't use light to impress. Use it to guide. He sat stunned. That sentence had never appeared in any official brochure, because the original sketch had never been credited to anyone. And now he understood. They hadn't just forgotten her name, they had erased it. At the same time, on the 5th floor in the PR department, the head of communications was calling an emergency meeting. One member of the team had discovered that all public materials, from the website, project registration files, to the promotional videos, never once mentioned Valentina Cruz. Not once. Not even an image. Despite the fact that she had been the final approver at every stage. The reason? She doesn't fit the commercial profile. A line once typed in an internal memo, now stung like a slap to the face. Valentina was Latina, didn't hold an Ivy League architecture degree, didn't come from the industry's power networks. More importantly, she was a woman who didn't network, didn't make deals over golf, didn't sip martinis after work to sign contracts. In a world where every CEO profile featured gray suits, blue ties, and blinding white smiles, Valentina was the one who didn't fit the mold. And because she didn't fit, she was pushed out. That afternoon, the media team received an internal email directly from Valentina. The message was simple. Within the next 48 hours, I am requesting a full system review of all credit acknowledgments related to Athena, including every individual, every edit, every decision. If my name is there, leave it. If it's not, explain why. Richard, the marketing director, held his head in his hands. This was no longer about image. This was an internal political crisis. Because when you erase the name of the person who built the foundation of a project, you're not just doing something wrong, you're deleting the truth. And truth doesn't stay silent forever. Elsewhere in the building, the young receptionist, Sophia, was sitting in the break room. In front of her was the video clip from the night before, replaying the moment Valentina spoke about not using light to impress. She watched it again and again, trying to remember the woman's gaze. Not angry, not accusatory, just a quiet look as if she'd already seen everything long ago. Then Sophia picked up her phone, opened her personal Instagram, and typed, "Last night I looked at someone and thought she didn't belong. Today I found out she built the whole place I work in." The post was quickly shared, and hundreds of people in the industry began commenting with similar experiences, being uncredited, being dismissed, being cut out of the light they had helped create. A new hashtag appeared beneath She Built Athena, credited or erased. Later that same day in the company's document archive room, a file manager came across an original printed copy of the initial contract signed with the city. On it, the section labeled Project Supervisor had a faint name scribbled out with white correction ink. The file manager shone a UV light on it. Beneath the whiteout was a single line, Valentina Cruz. Sophia had always thought of herself as just a small piece in a much bigger picture. A young woman with long brown hair from Boyle Heights, showing up 5 days a week to work the front desk at Cruz Realty, where every plaque on the wall bore names she had never met, and every smile on her face had to be maintained at just the right angle, tone, and timing. Every morning she straightened her uniform, tied her hair neatly, and repeated the same 3 lines over and over. "Good morning. How can I assist you today? Do you have an appointment? Please wait in the seating area to your right." She had never believed she could change anything, until that night, when the woman everyone ignored stepped onto the stage and made the whole system bow its head. Sophia didn't just feel shocked, she felt ashamed, because in that moment she realized she had seen it. She had known, if only for a fleeting second, that Valentina wasn't like the others. But she had done nothing. She had looked away, afraid of being scolded like her coworkers. And it was that choice that cost her sleep. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the office an hour early. No one had asked her to, but she needed to. She needed to look through the photos on her phone, the ones she used to take with pride, proud that she worked at such a fancy place. But now each picture felt like evidence of her own silence. She reopened the speech video, rewound again and again the moment Valentina said, "Maybe they didn't have enough light to see you." Sophia broke down in tears, not for Valentina, for herself. She saw herself in that gaze. A girl who once walked into that building dreaming of working in design but gave it up, thinking she wasn't good enough. A girl who used to sketch design ideas on coffee shop napkins but hid them away, afraid of being told it was poor people's art. And now she understood. She wasn't not good enough. She just hadn't been brave enough. That afternoon, Sophia wrote an internal email. The subject was simple, to Ms. Valentina. She didn't know if the CEO would ever read it, but she wrote anyway. "My name is Sophia. I work at the front desk on the ground floor. I was the one who didn't stand up when you were being disrespected. I'm sorry, but today I want to do something different. If the company is reviewing contribution credits, I know of some hand-drawn sketches that were once overlooked in the auxiliary file room. They don't have clear signatures, but I remember the drawing style. I studied architecture for 2 years before I dropped out. I'm not great, but I know when someone draws with real intention." She attached a photo to the email, a picture she had secretly taken on her phone 2 years ago, of an unsigned document that had been tossed into the office bin. The sketch was done in blue ink, no fancy colors, no copyright tags. But Sophia had never forgotten the way the light path had been traced with thin pen lines. And now, looking at it again, she knew that was Valentina's hand. An hour later, the email was answered, not by an assistant, but by Valentina herself. Just one line: "I see you, and I remember your eyes that day. You didn't look away." Sophia sat frozen, not because the CEO remembered her, but because, for the first time in her life, she had been seen. Not for her uniform, not for her cheerful customer voice, but for a single quiet moment she thought no one noticed. The moment she didn't turn away. That afternoon, Sophia received a message from Internal Affairs, inviting her to a special meeting. The staff feedback group was launching a review of cases where credits were misattributed or omitted in Cruise Realty's past projects. What surprised her wasn't just the invitation, but the location. The meeting wasn't held in a glass boardroom. It was held in the old library space, the one that had long been abandoned. When she walked in, about 10 others were already seated. All of them were people no one knew by name: technicians, support staff, night shift security, cleaning crew. On the table sat a whiteboard with a single phrase: "Who didn't get credit?" Valentina wasn't in the lead chair. She stood at the far end of the table, like a guest. And this time, she didn't speak. She listened. The first to speak was an older black maintenance worker. "In 2021, I reported that the lighting system on the 45th floor was off-axis. It could blind the residents across the street, but the lead architect told me I didn't know what I was talking about." Next, a Filipino IT staff member added, "I discovered a bug in the rendering software. I sent 3 emails. No one responded. They ended up using the faulty file anyway." Then a young woman of Iranian descent spoke hesitantly. "I wrote the line Athena, light above the noise, but it was registered under our creative director's name." Valentina didn't react. She just nodded, once to each person, then turned to Sophia. "Do you have something you'd like to share?" Sophia stood, slightly trembling, but she spoke. "I don't have anything to claim, but I know I was wrong to stay silent, and if I had a second chance today, I'd choose not to look away again." Valentina smiled. "Then starting tomorrow, you'll be the steward of the silent acknowledgement wall. This wall will be installed in the main lobby. It won't list bosses. It won't list titles. Only the names of those who were forgotten." Sophia stood in disbelief. She couldn't believe it. But Valentina simply placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You saw me. Now help me see the others." And Sophia understood, for the first time in her life, that she could change the system, even from the lowest position, as long as she dared to stand, from exactly where she stood. That night, while many at Cruise Realty were still gossiping about the CEO's new initiative, Sophia sat alone at the front desk, opened her laptop, and began to redraw the light layout from memory. She didn't know if it was good, but she knew. Light doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to shine on the right person. Valentina said nothing for 3 days after the meeting in the old library. No emails, no press releases, no external responses. But inside Cruise Realty, the silent doors began to tremble on their hinges. On Tuesday morning, the internal marketing team was summoned urgently to the 12th floor conference room. The department head, Richard, paced the floor with a thick stack of brochures in hand. The Athena promotional print from last month, with a red circle drawn around one prominent line: "Conceived by brilliance, built by legacy." He held it up in the middle of the room. "Who approved this line? Who signed off that our official message would be built by brilliance and a proud legacy?" A woman from brand management spoke softly. "I think it was the copywriting team, but it was approved by Mr. Miles." The room fell silent at that name. Miles, the former creative director, who had just retired earlier this year, was the mind behind Athena's entire branding campaign. And he was also the one who ordered all traces of Valentina removed from the original drafts. Valentina didn't attend the meeting, but just hours earlier, she had sent a brief internal email to Richard. "Could you show me all brochure drafts from the Athena campaign's development phase, including lines that were revised or cut?" Richard, still wondering why the CEO had remained quiet after revealing her identity, suddenly felt his pulse slow. He knew what was coming. That very afternoon, he brought the entire old hard drive, containing all the early brochure drafts, down to the internal archive room. One of the first versions bore the title, Athena, the Light She Drew. Below it was a tagline, a project named after a goddess, brought to life by the hand and instinct of a woman who saw light where others only saw walls. That line had been marked in red. A note beside it read, avoid personalizing the CEO, not suitable for high-end clients. In another draft, Valentina's profile photo had been suggested for the team introduction page. Instead, the final version featured three male architects in gray suits standing beside a model of Athena, with a note, photo shoot, make it Ivy League. Richard sat frozen in front of the screen. He remembered the first time he met Valentina. She had still been the project's executive director, unknown to everyone. She walked into the concept presentation meeting without saying a word, left behind a sketch, and walked out. Afterward, it was Miles who told him, she's too quiet to sell. Richard had believed him, because he too believed that in this industry, if a woman wanted to appear on the cover of a brochure, she had to look like someone who could spend money, not someone who knew how to build. That night, Richard sent Valentina an email. I want to apologize, and if you'll allow me, I'll rewrite the entire messaging. Her reply came 2 hours later, at 11:38 p.m. I don't need an apology. I need the truth corrected. And this time, let the truth have a face. The next morning, every internal screen at Cruise Realty went black, displaying one white line. The Athena campaign will be rewritten from the beginning. No other information was shared, but word spread fast among the employees. The CEO was wiping out all previous branding. Many pushed back, especially the sales team, who had already printed large volumes of materials and distributed them to VIP clients. Some sent anonymous emails. We can't just change the brand image over one emotional outburst. Another wrote, if we spotlight a Latina woman, Asian investors won't respond well. But this time, Valentina didn't stay silent. She summoned all department heads to a closed-door meeting. No cameras, no minutes, no assistants, only her voice, steady and clear. If a campaign has to erase a real person to become commercial, then it's not marketing. It's forgery. She continued, Athena is named after a goddess, but you turned it into the image of three men standing next to a model. You want clients to believe in creativity? Then start with truth. And the truth is, I drew this building. I was erased, and I will not allow that to happen again. Silence gripped the room. One executive opened his mouth to object, but froze when Valentina placed an original brochure draft on the table, complete with her own handwritten notes. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. But each word struck like a wooden peg being driven into the wall, firm, deliberate, and irreversible. 3 days later, the new campaign launched. Main title, Athena, drawn by her hands. The cover was a black and white photo, a partial image of the original blueprint, with a woman's hand resting next to an old pencil. No logos, no models, no celebrity faces. But it was real. And in just the first week, traffic to the official Athena website quadrupled. The media called it the brand reversal of the year. Outlets like Architectural Digest, the New York Times, even Forbes ran features about the woman who was erased from the brochure and how she rewrote her presence with the truth. Sophia, now officially appointed as the CEO's special assistant, was the one leading the audit of all visual materials. She was the one who discovered a forgotten video clip in an old digital folder. A silent recording of Valentina using hand gestures to explain the west-facing light design of Athena. That footage, wordless, was placed on the front page of the new brochure, carrying a simple message. Some people speak in spotlight. She spoke in silence. From her former position as a receptionist, Sophia had now become the truth editor of a campaign that was once built on a lie. And when she laid her hand on the freshly printed brochure, for the first time, she saw herself in it. Not in the image, but in the way truth, once seen, can never be erased again. As Valentina stepped onto the stage, the entire room seemed to freeze for 3 full breaths. Some people didn't yet understand what was happening. Others turned to each other, whispering, Who is that? She's the CEO? And those faint murmurs, barely louder than a mosquito's hum, quickly surged into an undercurrent flowing through every row of seats. No one had imagined that the modest woman they just dismissed was the one holding complete control over the project the entire city had been watching with anticipation. The spotlight hit Valentina's face, illuminating it like a mirror reflecting every glance that had brushed past her earlier in the lobby. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She didn't pose. She simply stood still, holding the microphone with both hands as if she were trying to keep 3 years of suppressed anger from spilling out all at once. Valentina lifted her head, looked straight into the front row where the senior management team was seated, and spoke in a voice not loud, but clear to every syllable. "I'm not good at speeches. I don't enjoy the spotlight. But I'm here because there are things that need to be said, not to correct mistakes, but to remind people of the truths that have been forgotten." A silent wave swept across the room. Down below, Angela Spencer stared at her phone, not typing, just letting her hand rest on the screen, as if hoping it would deliver a logical explanation for what was unfolding. A few others opened social media, typing in Valentina Cruz, slowly realizing that she wasn't unknown. She had simply been deliberately kept in the shadows by the system. Valentina continued, "Athena is not a building. It's a promise between me and my father, a man who believed that great structures shouldn't just symbolize wealth, but should be opportunities to bring light to places once deemed unworthy of it." An elderly man sitting in the third row nodded slightly. He was one of the few who remembered the groundbreaking ceremony 3 years ago, when Valentina stood on stage next to her father. Though the press that day only photographed him, not her, the whispers grew louder. A staff member from the company's design team, named Jordan, turned to his colleague and whispered, "I remember now. Last year we received a sketch from the account V. Cruz, but it was ignored because there was no official title attached. She was the sender." His co-worker replied, "I saw handwriting like that on the rooftop plans. I assumed it came from someone at Wexler and Park." Jordan paused, then murmured aloud, "We used her design, but removed her name from the credits." That statement made both of them glan. 1 week after the campaign, Athena, drawn by her hands, was launched. A simple email was sent to 12 individuals within Cruz Realty. No flashy subject line, no branded template, just a scanned handwritten invitation attached as an image. "You are invited to a special dinner, not for what you were credited for, but for what should have been acknowledged long ago." It was signed Valentina. Below the message was the location, a small restaurant on 8th Street, once her father's favorite diner. No VIP room, no tasting menu, just wooden tables, old glassware, and yellow lights strung across the ceiling like the glow of a late-season sunset. Sophia was the first to arrive. She wore a simple black dress, her hair tied in a high bun, and carried a notebook listing those who had been overlooked in past projects. After her came Jordan, the design engineer, then the black maintenance worker, the Iranian girl whose slogan was taken, a logistics staffer named Maria, who once corrected the basement floor plans but was never mentioned for it. In total, 11 guests had arrived. The 12th had not yet shown up. Valentina entered at 7:01 p.m. No assistant, no bodyguard, only a small beige canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She walked around the table, shaking each hand, not out of social courtesy, but as if every handshake was restoring a person's rightful place. When she sat down, no one spoke right away. She looked around the table and said, "I didn't invite you here tonight to eat. I invited you to say your names." No one understood at first. She smiled. "We've lived in a system where names are a privilege. Who gets named and who gets ignored isn't about who did more or less. It's about who is allowed to be seen. Tonight, I want to do the opposite. I want to hear each of you say your name aloud and tell one thing you did that was never acknowledged." Silence. Then the maintenance worker spoke first. "My name is Clarence Brown. In 2021, I manually adjusted the lighting axis on the 45th floor because the software glitched. Nose toward the stage, as if hearing Valentina for the first time." Angela Spencer remained silent. Her hand, still holding the phone, was trembling, not from anger, but because, for the first time in her life, She realized she had insulted not just a person, but a legacy. Valentina, I remember your name. When it was Sophia's turn, she stood up. She didn't read from her notebook. I'm Sofia Alvarez. I once saw someone being dismissed, and I didn't stand up. But today, I'm here so I won't look away again. Valentina looked at her for a long moment, then said simply, Thank you for seeing. When everyone had spoken, Valentina opened the canvas bag and pulled out a small box. Inside were 12 wooden plaques, each one engraved with the name of the speaker and the line, "A light they placed in silence." She handed each plaque out by hand, not as a formality, but as a gesture of trust. I can't change the past, but I can make sure that from now on, anyone who walks into Athena will see your names, not at the top floor, but at the ground floor, where people enter, where the light touches first. Sophia saw Jordan quietly wipe his eyes. Clarence held his plaque like the hand of an old friend. Layla simply took a photo and texted it to her mother. Mom, they said my name. No one needed flowers. No one needed press. All they wanted was what the system had taken from them for so many years. A simple acknowledgement that they had been here, that they had done something right, even if no one had remembered. Just as Valentina was about to close the evening, the restaurant door opened. The 12th guest arrived late, an elderly woman with silver hair, wearing modest clothes. She stepped in gently and said, I'm the one who helped draft the original Athena layout with your father. I'm the one who brought you to your first blueprint. Valentina stood up immediately. You, Miss Marisol? The woman nodded. I never thought I'd be invited, but I received a handwritten letter, so I knew it was real. Valentina took her hand. I walked this whole journey to reclaim my name, but I forgot who gave it to me. Ms. Marisol smiled, eyes misty. You didn't forget. You just arrived at the right moment to remember. That evening, Valentina posted nothing online. No articles, no media interviews, but 12 photographs taken by Sophia on film were printed and hung in the main conference room. No CEO name, just a small line under each frame. They were here. They made this. And that's how a dinner with no spotlight, but filled with the names once hidden, made it impossible for the system to look away ever again. In the week following the dinner with names, something strange began to spread through the halls of Cruise Realty. Not with banners, not through press conferences, but through folded white sheets of paper, tucked into places no one usually noticed. Under the technical desks, behind the printer in HR, inside drawers of the old internal library. On each sheet were handwritten lines, no signatures, no titles, only a shared header. I once saw. Valentina discovered this one Thursday morning when she stepped into the elevator on the 11th floor and saw a small note taped to the mirror, the handwriting slightly slanted. I once saw an employee get terminated for pointing out an error in the construction plan. I didn't say anything. I was afraid of being called disruptive. Now I wish I had spoken up. She read it, took it down, folded it, and slipped it into her pocket, without saying a word. But when she arrived at her office, another note was taped to the glass door. I once saw 3 female engineers removed from a design meeting because they didn't match the strong tone. I stayed silent, but I remember their faces. It continued like that for a week. Every day a few new confessions appeared, not as accusations, not demanding justice, but quiet awakenings. As if the system itself was finally opening its mouth, one clenched tooth at a time, after years of silence. No one orchestrated it. There was no task force, but everyone knew something was happening. Sophia began collecting the notes, storing them in a small wooden box under her desk. She didn't submit them to the CEO. She didn't send them to PR. She just read them, folded them, and added them to a list titled, The Ones Who Once Saw. A list that required no names, only late courage. One day, Valentina passed by Sophia's desk and softly asked, May I see the box? Sophia handed it to her without a word. Valentina sat in the empty chair beside her, unfolding each note and reading them one by one. She didn't speak for nearly 20 minutes. When she finished, she closed the lid, looked at Sophia, and asked, If we created a space for them to speak, do you think they would? Sophia hesitated. I think, They're waiting for someone to give them permission. Valentina nodded. Then we'll give it. 3 days later, a simple message appeared on the internal company network. White text on a gray background. Open room, a space for the ones who stood silently. No recording, no filming, no name tags. Below that was the location. The auxiliary conference room on the third floor, once used only for HR trainings. The room would remain open for 3 days, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Anyone could enter. Anyone could leave. No one was required to leave anything behind. But in the center of the room stood a single tabletop wireless microphone connected to the ceiling speaker system, broadcasting only within that room. One person spoke. 10 others listened. No one saw anyone. No audio was recorded. On the first day, no one spoke. A single technician came in, sat silently for 30 minutes, and left. On the second day, 2 people spoke. One recalled seeing a name replaced by a supervisor's in a project credit list. Another told how she was asked to change a female character in a brochure to a male because women don't sell homes. By the third day, the sound system echoed from 10 a.m. to nearly 6 p.m., nonstop. An elderly woman's trembling voice. I once saw Valentina removed from the project coordination board, even though she wrote the original execution memo. A middle-aged man's voice. I'm a department manager. I was once asked to keep Athena's image from being feminized. I did it, and I regret it. A young person. I stayed silent when I heard my friend called too brown to meet foreign clients. I'm a person of color, but I still stayed silent because I was afraid I'd be cut too. Valentina came on the final day. She didn't speak. She sat quietly in the back row, unrecognized. She listened to the voices of people who had never appeared on any official credit lists, and she didn't cry. But when she left the room, in her hand was the last note taped to the door. I used to think silence was survival. Now I know it's how you lose yourself. That day, she returned to her office and made a decision. All credit records for past Cruise Realty projects would be reopened. A new independent group would be formed, not led by executives, not overseen by managers, but made up of lower-level employees, tasked with reviewing, finding, and restoring the names of those who had been forgotten. The project was named the ECHO Initiative. Sophia was its first coordinator. Jordan joined. Clarence did too. And one by one, others followed, sending in names, memories, old photos, lost emails, hand-drawn prints, even handwritten letters. The story was no longer just Valentina's. It had grown beyond her. It became the story of everyone who had once stood in the shadows, and now stepped forward not to demand, but to affirm, I was there, and I am silent no more. The unveiling of the first wall of the ECHO Initiative had no media coverage, no live streams, no hashtags, just a bare brick wall on the ground floor of Cruise Realty's headquarters, once a secondary lobby for internal staff, a place no one ever stopped to look at. It had been painted in a cold gray, never adorned with a single frame. And yet on that day, when the first light streamed through the tall glass doors, the carved names on the bricks began to emerge. Not flashy, not gilded, but real enough to make people stop in their tracks. At the top row were names verified through original sketches, subcontracts, internal emails. Some belonged to former interns who corrected lighting maps, some to security guards who later received overdue apology letters after being fired for being unprofessional when suggesting better emergency exit designs. One name belonged to someone no longer alive. Raul Mendoza, who died in an accident during the glass roof installation of Athena. In the records, he was initially listed only as subcontractor number 14. That day, his son, a sophomore in architecture school, stood in silence, reading his father's name engraved on the wall. Raul Mendoza, the one who knew that light needs shadow to be seen. Valentina didn't speak. She stood in the back, among the employees, watching Sophia step forward holding a small wooden plaque. Sophia said simply, every person here helped build Athena, and other projects too, but no one ever invited them to a ribbon cutting. Today, we're not cutting a ribbon. We're just removing one thing. Silence. She placed the plaque on a stand beneath a sign that read, The Wall of Names They Never Said. After that, small groups came to read. No one filmed. Some took photos of names they recognized. A young engineer broke down crying when he found his mother's name. She had been a night cleaner on the project. He never knew she had submitted a safety suggestion to redesign the stairway treads for elderly users. But because she didn't have a degree, the proposal had been filed under someone else's name. Now her full name was on the wall, Luisa Martinez, the one who made sure others didn't fall. Each day, new names were carved into the wall, not in alphabetical order, not by job title, but in the order stories were submitted and verified. Every name was a vow. This system will no longer repeat the silence it once allowed. It was Jordan who suggested making the name Wall a stop on the client tour. At first, the sales team resisted. Clients won't want sad stories. But then a group of Japanese investors visited and paused in front of the name, Yuki Ito, the one who fixed the drainage system by hand during the rain. They stood there reading it for 10 minutes. One female guest turned to a sales rep and said, "I choose to buy in a place that remembers the ones who don't wear suits." From then on, the wall wasn't an add-on. It became the main stop on every walkthrough. Valentina watched all of it quietly, but she knew this didn't happen because of her. It happened because of Sophia, because of Jordan, because of those who stepped out of silence. And because of that, she made the decision to expand the Echo Initiative across every national branch of Cruise Realty. Each location began receiving guidelines to build its own internal wall of names. No obligations, no marketing, just a moral commitment. If someone was forgotten, let their name return, exactly where they once stood in the shadows. One of the first branches to respond was a small office in Albuquerque. There, an employee found a handwritten letter from a Navajo woman who once supplied local timber. In the letter she wrote, "I don't need anyone's thanks, but if someone ever wonders why the stairs on the 12th floor don't slip in the cold, it's because I soaked the wood in pine oil before delivery." That same week, her name was carved at the branch office, Miriam Red Feather, the one who soaked the wood in silence. Later, when Sophia was invited to the San Francisco office to share the journey of the Echo Initiative, she stood in a packed conference room and said one sentence that made the entire room fall silent. "This system used to run on the logic of big names, but we've learned something. Those who weren't named were holding up the truest part of the building all along." On an early winter morning, as the thin mist still clung to the west-facing glass of Cruise Realty's headquarters, a small truck pulled up in front of the ground floor entrance. No announcements had been made. No one knew what was coming. But when the white cloth was lifted and the scent of freshly carved wood still lingered in the air, people began to stop and fall silent. In the center courtyard, once an outdoor cafe space, now cleared of plastic chairs and oversized umbrellas, a soft white stone sculpture stood. It wasn't a CEO in a power pose, not an architect holding a blueprint, not a businessman flashing a gold watch. It was a woman leaning forward to lay a brick into the ground, her hair tied back, her shirt plain, her hands still marked with scrapes. There was nothing to indicate who she was. No plaque, no name, no installation date, no honors listed. Just a silent stone base and sunlight catching on the random etchings, making it feel as if her hands were still in motion, placing each brick one by one. The first to stop was Clarence. He said nothing. He simply removed his safety helmet, placed it over his chest, and stood still. Then came Sophia, placing her hand gently on the statue's foot, her eyes wide as if every curve recalled everything she had once done, and everything she had once failed to do. When Valentina arrived, she didn't step forward. She stood at the back among the crowd. Among those who had no idea that she was the one who had personally chosen the sculpture design, adapted it from an old model her late mother had drawn, and given strict instructions. No name is to be engraved. After a moment, someone asked, "Who is being honored?" No one answered. Then a quiet voice replied, "It was Layla, the Iranian woman who had her slogan taken away. Maybe all the people who never had a nameplate." Silence rippled outward like waves, and in that silence the statue spoke louder than words. Not because it said anything, but because it didn't need to. That evening, the media began to notice. Some articles called it the first unnamed labor woman statue at an American real estate headquarters. Others objected, why isn't anyone credited? Why not name the person who deserves it? A journalist from a major architecture magazine wrote, this feels like visual morality theater, using a nameless statue to obscure who should really be honored. But as that piece spread, the opposite happened. In the comments section, hundreds of employees from other companies wrote the same sentence. I once laid a brick, and no one asked them what their name was. Valentina read every line. She made no public response, no press release. Instead, she took a single action. She enacted a new company-wide policy. From now on, every Cruise Realty project, whether it's a skyscraper, a housing complex, or a shopping center, must reserve a space to recognize unnamed contributions. No job titles, no job descriptions, just a simple record of a timely action, witnessed and verified by another. The initiative was called the Unnamed List. 1 week later, at a new development site on the outskirts of Phoenix, a group of local workers discovered a small plaque placed at the edge of the lot. It simply read, "For those who laid the first brick and were never asked their name." Later, Sophia recounted that it was the first time she saw Valentina cry, not when she was honored, but when she watched someone else quietly place a hand on the statue and whisper, "Thank you for letting me be seen, even though I'm not the main character." And that was the moment Sophia understood. Justice doesn't always need banners, brass plaques, or beating drums. Sometimes it just needs a statue without a name, to remind us that every name once mattered, even if no one remembered. At the start of January, the Cruise Realty headquarters in Los Angeles remained architecturally unchanged. The mirrored facade still reflected the gray sky, the light gray steps still led into the same sleek lobby, and the ceiling lights still cast the same steady white glow on the marble floors. But something, though unspoken, had shifted entirely. And that shift lived right on the ground floor, where the wall of names, built nearly 2 months earlier, had quietly become the building's acknowledged center of stillness. The wall stood still. No gloss, no frame, no weatherproof coating, no spotlight, and yet it could not be ignored. Because for 8 weeks, every single brick, every engraved name on its rough surface, had become the place employees stopped first each morning and the final place visitors turned to before leaving. It was more than a recognition board. It was a litmus test to see if you paused for an unnamed truth or rushed past like before. Valentina no longer needed to appear daily. She had gradually stepped back from regular meetings, not out of fatigue, but because the system had begun to speak for itself. Sophia no longer worked reception. She was now the senior coordinator of the Echo Initiative, a national network tasked with uncovering, verifying, and restoring the contributions of people once overlooked in real estate projects. Her new office was on the 3rd floor, across from the engineering department, a quiet but powerful symbol of the link between silent labor and long-delayed recognition. On the second Monday of the new year, Valentina requested a company-wide meeting. No agenda, no attachments. People assumed it was a late-year summary or a new strategy rollout. But when they entered the 8th floor auditorium, all they saw was a black screen with a single white line. Who will write the next line on the wall? No one understood immediately. Then Valentina stepped on stage. No microphone, no spotlight, just a piece of white chalk in her hand, and said, "There's no speech today. I have nothing to say except one question. How many times have we stood in front of that wall, and what have we written in our hearts each time we walked away?" She then pulled a piece of paper from her coat pocket and read aloud a line Sophia had sent her the day before. "I have nothing to say, but I've learned not to look away." Valentina paused, then added, "If any of you have ever stayed silent in front of what was right, today is your chance to rewrite that choice." She walked off the stage. No one replaced her, no speaker, no moderator. 10 minutes of silence passed, and then someone stood up. It was Clarence. He walked to the front, said nothing, and wrote on the board, "I was a security guard. No one knew I fixed the emergency door lock on the 17th floor when it jammed." The room stayed silent. Then a young engineer stood up and wrote, "I once reported a critical design error. My manager told me not to escalate." An older woman followed, "I once hid Valentina's original design plan because I was pressured to change the project lead's name." The meeting became a room of restoration, where people rewrote past truths with new courage. That afternoon, Sophia proposed preserving every written line from the meeting in an internal archive. Not for PR, not for media, just to display at the entrance of the Echo division. Valentina agreed but requested, "Don't print it by the writer's name. Print it in the order of how long they stayed silent." It took Sophia 4 days to match the timestamps. But when it was done, the final print became a timeline, not just of silence, but of rising through it. The following week, several new names were engraved onto the wall downstairs. One gave Sophia pause. Angela Spencer, the same woman who once humiliated Valentina during the Athena unveiling. The former face of Cruise Realty's sales team. She no longer held her old title, but instead of resigning, Angela had sent a handwritten letter to the Echo Initiative. "I once took credit. I once erased names. I once mocked people for how they looked. But I too was erased by my own father, who passed away not remembering I was his daughter. I'm not asking to be forgiven. I'm only asking to stand beside those I once pushed out." Valentina didn't respond. But a week later, Angela's name appeared on the wall. Modest, not highlighted, placed quietly between the names of the two engineers she had once excluded from a project credit list. When reporters asked why someone who had done harm was listed beside those who had been wronged, Sophia answered, "This wall doesn't classify people. It only holds the truth. And truth isn't always clean. Sometimes it needs to be left alone, so those who once denied it can finally face it." One Friday morning, Valentina walked through the lobby and saw a group of high school students on a guided tour. As they paused in front of the wall, one student asked, "Are these the people who built the building?" The tour guide answered, "They didn't build with cement. They built with the things others overlooked." The girl went quiet, then asked, "If I grow up and no one remembers my name, could my name go here too?" The guide didn't know what to say, but Valentina, standing quietly behind, smiled, because she knew if a 15-year-old could look at that wall and understand what unconditional acknowledgement meant, then justice no longer had to shout. By the end of January, the wall had stopped being just a place to engrave names. It became a place to step back. One manager, before terminating an employee, stood in front of the wall for 5 minutes, then returned and revised the termination reason. One customer, who had once filed an unfair complaint, came back to apologize to a receptionist and left behind a handwritten note. "I forgot that everyone lays a brick of their own." Sophia archived the note. That day, she wrote in her journal, "Justice is no longer action, it's reflex." By February, Valentina stepped down as CEO, quietly, without ceremony, no announcement, just an email sent late on a Friday. "The system now knows how to listen. I'll take a step back so it can keep speaking." No one cried, no one protested, because they knew she wasn't leaving them. She was stepping back so they could step closer to the wall. On her last day, Valentina took one final walk around the building. She didn't enter the boardroom. She didn't return to her executive office. She stopped in front of the wall and stood still. No one took a photo, but someone else quietly joined her. "Sophia." They said nothing. Sophia pulled a small card from her pocket and slipped it between two bricks. On it were just the words, "The one who didn't need her name, but gave names back to everyone else." Valentina didn't remove the card. She walked away. The wall remained still, and from that day forward, anyone who ever stepped into Cruise Realty, even once, understood. That building didn't rise higher because of who held the title of CEO. It reached deep. No one explicitly announced that Valentina had left, but everyone knew. There were no more soft footsteps in the 8th-floor hallway each morning. No more three-knock rhythm before she entered a meeting room. No more 12-word emails that made the entire system move. And yet something hadn't disappeared. Her influence remained, like a quiet blueprint, not locked in a safe, but living in people's behaviors, in their glances, in the way they looked at one another. Sophia felt the absence most vividly. After her official appointment as Director of Internal Culture and Recognition, she didn't need to learn any leadership protocols. She only needed to ask herself one question. If Valentina were standing here, what would she listen for? From that single question, Sophia created something no one expected, the listening blueprint, a document just 3 pages long, with no diagrams, no bullet points, no KPIs. Only three principles. If someone is silent, don't assume they have nothing to say. If someone is recognized, ask who else has not yet been mentioned. If you feel something is right but aren't sure, take one small step. The system will meet you halfway. The listening blueprint was sent to all employees. Reading it wasn't mandatory, but within 3 weeks, over 87% of staff had read it and sent feedback. One message came from a small branch in Montana. I've worked in this industry for 20 years. This is the first time I've read a company policy that felt like it was written for real people, not to manage legal risk. In March at the Seattle branch, a new kind of wall was installed, this time not made of stone, but of laser-etched tempered glass that refracted light differently throughout the day. Each name engraved wasn't chosen by management, but nominated by coworkers. When someone touched a name, a short recording of their real story played through the ceiling speakers, no longer than 20 seconds. People didn't listen to remember faces. They listened to remember actions. Sophia began receiving more invitations, not to lecture, but to listen and document emerging models of recognition. She visited a branch in Texas where instead of a name wall, the CEO's portrait in the main lobby was replaced with a group photo of the janitorial staff taken during a stormy morning, captured just as they finished mopping the floors before the building opened. She visited a partner company in Chicago where the 10-year anniversary celebration didn't involve cake or a DJ, but a handwritten letter from every employee addressed to someone in the company they silently owe. And she realized Valentina hadn't started a movement. She had left behind an entirely new strand of organizational DNA. In April, when Cruise Realty was nominated as Most Pioneering Workplace Culture of the Year, Sophia declined to give media interviews. Instead, she sent a 3-minute video, a montage of people touching the wall at headquarters. No narration, no music, no interviews, just hands. The hands of the elderly, the young, white hands, brown hands, hands in safety gloves, hands with painted nails, pressing against each name. The video went viral, and something unexpected happened. Other companies began asking themselves, who's being ignored in our system? By summer at a national real estate conference, Sophia was the closing speaker. She stepped onto the stage with no slides, only a slip of paper. She read, Valentina once said, a fair system doesn't need someone at the top. It only needs a ground floor wall real enough to make people stop. Today, I'm not here to talk about Cruise Realty's success. I'm here to ask one simple question. Is there someone laying bricks for you whose name you never learned? If there is, don't wait for a corporate campaign. Don't wait for leadership approval. Go find them and start with a sentence that needs no template. I think I forgot you somewhere. The audience rose to their feet, not because it was an inspiring speech, but because they saw themselves in it. People who had passed through years of work without looking back, and now they were learning to turn around without shame. Valentina wasn't at the conference, but in the small apartment by the sea where she now lived, there was a wooden box on her desk. Inside it, the first letter Sophia had ever sent. I saw you, and I didn't look away. Beside it was a photograph of the wall at dusk in December, when the sunlight hit just right and every name cast a reflection on the ceiling, like a galaxy made from those who had once been forgotten. She smiled. Not because someone remembered her, but because now people were remembering each other. On the first Monday of December, Baltimore turned cold early. Thin gusts of wind slipped through the edges of glass windows, bringing a chill that didn't numb but awakened. The entire city seemed to slow by half a beat, and within that stillness stood Cruise Realty's East Coast headquarters. Once a metalworks factory, now transformed into a training center with polished concrete floors and an industrial high ceiling. But one thing hadn't changed: the quiet presence of a promise, unspoken yet carried by everyone who entered. That week, a short announcement appeared on every internal screen. This Friday, Baltimore Ground Floor Hall. Topic, the final promise. No follow-up emails, no breakout sessions, no themed subgroups. But those who had taken part in the Echo Initiative, whose names had been carved into the wall, who had once whispered truths in the open room, knew what it meant. No one had to say a word. They simply nodded at each other, as if they had been waiting for this day all along. Friday, 8:17 a.m. The hall opened earlier than scheduled. Sophia arrived first. She wore no designer label, just a dark blue blouse and simple gray pants. In her hands was a stack of letters, not to distribute, but to read aloud. Letters from employees across the country who hadn't yet found the courage to speak for themselves. Clarence was next. He didn't change out of his maintenance uniform. He wore the same old gray coveralls with a faded red paint stain at the wrist from a few days prior. When he entered, he didn't look for a seat. He walked a slow circle around the hall, checking the lights, the sound system. No one had asked him to, but everyone felt reassured that he did. By 9 a.m., nearly 300 people filled the room. No head table, no VIP section. On the stage stood only a blank whiteboard, a single microphone, and behind it, a black screen. Empty, as if waiting for someone to write the first line. Sophia stepped forward. No introduction, no greetings, just a long gaze that gently quieted every scattered thought in the room. Then she spoke. I was the first to record a forgotten name, not because I was brave, but because I was the last one left in the room that day. The hall fell utterly silent. She opened the stack of letters, pulled one out, and read, I once designed the glass frame on the 9th floor, but because I didn't have a college degree, I was removed from the presentation team. She folded it, set it aside. I was the one who brought coffee to the engineering department every morning, and once I prevented an electrical short circuit when I unplugged the wrong socket. Yet all my boss said was that I'd messed up the cable layout. Another letter. I was the one who cleaned the building's glass walls, and I saw my husband's name engraved on an apartment unit. No one knew I had designed the plumbing for that floor. Sophia looked up. Every line I read is a moment this system owes someone a thank you. And today I want to ask, who among you is still holding a name that's never been said? Silence. Then Clarence stood up. He didn't walk to the stage. He simply spoke from the back row. My name is Clarence. I once stayed silent when someone was fired for speaking up about a flawed design. That person later died in a worksite accident. I can't change that, but I've since corrected everything he once suggested. I don't need my name on the wall. I just want one brick to carry his name. Then he sat back down. No one spoke, but every eye in the room had shifted. A young woman stepped forward, an engineer from the Austin office. She said, I've only been here 6 months. I haven't earned anything yet, but I'm here today because I was once a kid whose name never made it into the class album. And when I saw that wall for the first time, I felt I didn't need to be outstanding to be seen. She stepped back, not in tears, but the entire room held its breath as if creating space for that tear, should it choose to fall. Then someone stood, then another, then another. No facilitator, no agenda. People began sharing names, not their own, but those of people they once saw being forgotten. The name of a mother who used to say, do the right thing even if no one thanks you. The name of a former manager forced out for refusing to cover up mistakes. The name of a janitor injured on duty who returned just to finish his shift saying, I don't want the next person to clean up what I left behind. One story wove into another, as if someone was quietly threading a new cloth, not to display but to shelter the goodness that had never been protected. And then, in the middle of these stories, the room paused. The back door opened. A woman walked in. No one turned around. No name was needed, no applause. Because some people, when they arrive, are already the answer to questions we haven't yet learned to ask. Valentina wore a stone-colored sweater, dark gray pants, no makeup, no ID badge. She didn't walk straight to the stage. She moved slowly through each row, resting her hand on a shoulder here, nodding quietly there, smiling. When she reached the whiteboard, she picked up the marker, not to write immediately, but to spin it between her fingers, then looked over the room and said calmly, I was once the woman no one greeted when I walked into my own lobby. And that day I sat down, not because I was powerless, but because I wanted to know. If I said nothing, would the system still see me? She turned to the board and wrote 3 lines, not large, not dramatic. I was once overlooked. I was once erased, but I never erased myself from the system I believe could change. Then she put the marker down and said, "I'm not here to say goodbye. I'm here to acknowledge something. I'm no longer the only one keeping the promise. Now it's all of you. And if you keep it, this system won't need me anymore." She stepped back, leaving the stage. No one replaced her, but everyone understood. The stage now belonged to them. No more a single leader, but a community standing together. That day, no video was recorded, no hashtags trended, but by evening, a new status appeared on the internal network, shared thousands of times. The final promise wasn't written in words. It was written in how we looked at each other afterward. Maybe somewhere in this video, you saw a piece of yourself. In the woman who was ignored, in the young girl who couldn't speak up, or in the quiet hands that helped build something no one remembered. And if your heart went still for a moment, you're not alone. Because millions out there have been forgotten by the very systems they helped create. But today you've seen this. Justice doesn't need a microphone. Kindness doesn't need a spotlight. And sometimes a wall that stands still can change the way we see each other. If there's someone in your life who was once left out, pushed aside, or unseen, don't hesitate. Write their name in the comments below. We'll read them. We'll remember. Because this wall doesn't end with the video. It begins here, with us. And if you want to continue this journey, where untold stories are finally given a voice, hit subscribe so you never miss a whisper from those who've waited far too long to be heard.